I personally believe we've only learned the tip of the iceberg when it comes to math. And if you do believe in extraterrestrial life, I think that the math that they practice, the concepts of physics and other things are so far advanced beyond what we have discovered up to this point. And to me, it's just this discovery that we have yet to come to that we are going to continue over the next decades and centuries learning more and more as we get further and further into our desire to do off-world exploration,
Mhm.
which is going to lead us to have to figure out new ways to do things. Shalini, I wanted to go back to the concept that you brought up earlier about belonging. And in the book, you talk about the benefits of membership. And you say that scientists have studied the value of belonging, and the value is immense, especially when it comes to math. And I talk a lot about on this show the importance of mattering. And to me, mattering and belonging kind of go hand in hand. And in this section of the book, you talk about Larry Summers, the then president of Harvard University in 2005, set off a firestorm by saying or implying that girls were not as capable as boys in the fields of STEM due to their gender. And what he was talking about was the lack of participation of women in the STEM pipeline at the university level, saying that the STEM pipeline is sometimes called leaky, meaning that despite the number of women able to participate in STEM based on their scores comparable to men, so many of them drop out. Can you talk about the work that Carol Dweck, Anita Raton, and Catherine Good did to research this suggestion and what they found?
Is shocking, actually. Thank you for referencing that study. I'll go back to that hazing of my ninth grade math class. So in that ninth grade math class, we're back in the early 90s, late 80s at this point. There are only a few girls in this class to begin with. It's a selective class. The teacher comes out with the bold first day of class, first morning of ninth grade without enough chairs, and then terrifies us saying that he's going to fail us out. And I'll tell you that until the children were actually my other fellow peer children were failed out, until then, I was convinced I was going to be failed out. And what's the reason? The reason is that there is a myth, which is girls can't do math. And I'm in that classroom as one of 4 or 5 girls, and girls can't do math. So every day I have 2 challenges. The first is to learn this accelerated mathematics, and the second is to prove that girls can do math. And that's just extra work. And then when I come home, or if I do poorly on a test, or if I come home and I can't do my math homework, I have 2 thoughts in my brain. The first is I'm thinking about the math itself, right? So let's say it's quadratics or factoring polynomials. So I'm thinking about that. And then I'm also wondering, can girls do math? I've got this extra thought process. And it's referenced as churn, right? So just there's this extra churn taking away my brain from doing the work in front of me, wasting my brain energy, but also really sapping my confidence and feeling like I can participate. And so so Larry Summers allegedly said this. What he actually said isn't clear, but folks in the room freaked out for sure. And Carol Dweck and her colleagues did an incredible study. What they basically did was they looked at students at one of the most selective universities. That university isn't named, but it's one of the most selective universities in the country. And those students were in a higher level math class. So they'd already done a bunch of mathematics to get into that university. And then they were in an upper level math class, which means they had to have done the prerequisite courses and done well. And they first asked all of those young adults, men and women, whether or not they felt they belonged in the university setting, just general sense of belonging. And here they found no difference. They didn't find that the girls or the women or the men had a different perspective on their belonging in the university setting. But then they drilled in to see how these young adults felt about math class. And the level of just how fragile the sense of membership and the sense of belonging that these women had compared to the men was shocking. And one question that always sticks with me is the question I asked the women was something like, if I do poorly on a test, do I believe that the professor would invest in me? Yes or no? And most of the men said, yeah, I believe that. And most of the women said, no, I don't believe they would. And so it's really interesting, right? That you don't even believe that the person who's there with the expertise to help you, if you did poorly, would help you. The other thing that the study showed was how little it took to knock women off the path after a decade plus of success. So to get into the selective university, you've already done so well in mathematics. Then you've spent a couple years at the selective university doing upper level math classes, doing well. Now you're near the end of your university experience and you do poorly, or you have one bad experience and you're like, forget it, throw in the towel, forget math. After all that effort and all that success, that's pretty shocking. And that is still the world of math we live in. And because math is the foundation of anything in STEM, it then relates to the overall STEM pipeline.